of a second carrier as excessive and in some ways as humiliating to the Chinese, because the Chinese couldn't do much to deter or complicate the deployment of those carriers.
我知道美国真正的
I know this story well, and I can tell you that the truth is very different from the American propaganda. I was there in 1996. The Americans had promised to send an aircraft carrier to Taiwan for Election Day to protect Taiwan. But actually, the only American ship near Taiwan was the electronic spy ship Bunker Hill. And it was more than 200 nautical miles away. And the first American aircraft carrier was 600 nautical miles from Taiwan. So the truth is that the Americans announced that they were coming, but they kept their distance. They wanted at all costs to avoid any incident, and they didn't dare approach our army.
Even if the Americans didn't take much of a risk, in the eyes of the world, they reaffirmed a sacred principle of their foreign policy. They support Taiwan. And they will continue to do so, regardless of China's growing power.
I think believes Taiwan is very important for a number of reasons, not to mention the fact that it's our 8th largest trading partner, our 6th largest market for agricultural goods. It's one of America's most important sources of high-tech semiconductor products. Even though they're imported to the United States via China, they're made in Taiwan. But that, of course, isn't the only thing. The real reason I think America has a commitment to Taiwan is because Taiwan is a democracy. It is, in fact, the most vibrant and dynamic democracy in East Asia. And it's a democracy that came to fruition under the pressure of the U.S. government, primarily the Congress, after 40 years of very tight authoritarian rule by a regime that came from mainland China. I think, however, the real reason that the United States, especially the Pentagon, is so concerned about Taiwan is that it has been a very strong defense and intelligence partner for the last 50 years, including the last 30 years since the breaking of relations with the Republic of China on Taiwan. We have still maintained a very strong defense relationship and a very strong intelligence collection relationship with Taiwan.
I would say the United States is committed to Taiwan. This goes back historically a long, long way. World War II, we were there. And we were looking for a strong, unified, democratic China. Well, we got 2/3 of it. Strong and unified, not democratic. Now we're calling China a responsible stakeholder. We've got half of it. We've got a stakeholder, but not a responsible one yet. U.S. feels that we have an obligation, legal, moral, to Taiwan, that we cannot stand idly by and let this be taken over by what looks like an authoritarian, communist-influenced power. This cannot be.
Taiwan, an island of 23 million inhabitants, 250 kilometers from the Chinese coast, is today the most explosive strategic issue between China and the United States. Taipei, the capital, flaunts its economic success. It is one of the biggest centers in the world for the electronics industry. A modern city, free, young, and always noisy. In 1895, Taiwan was invaded by Japan. 50 years later, after the Japanese defeat, peace treaties returned the territory to China, a China which was then in the midst of a civil war between Mao's communists and Chiang Kai-shek's nationalists. When the battle turned in Mao's favor, General Chiang Kai-shek, aided by the Americans, took refuge in Taiwan with his soldiers. Since then, two Chinese governments have coexisted. In Beijing, the communist regime that controls the entire mainland. And in Taipei, the nationalist regime, having become little by little a democracy, calling itself the Republic of China, which rules only Taiwan. Officially, these two governments both claim to be the legitimate representatives of all the Chinese. Taiwan is not recognized as a state by the UN. Only 20 small countries maintain diplomatic relations with the island, a fragile independence, while Beijing still considers Taiwan as the 23rd province of the People's Republic, a rebel province that the regime intends to reunite with the motherland.
I would say two major motivations. There are many others, but two major ones. The first one is national pride, unification of China. They are committed to this. This is a strong emotional drive in China. And you don't downplay it. It's real. It's powerful. The second is strategic. They know through history, if Taiwan is in unfriendly hands, that China is very badly affected.
If you turn the globe around, and if you were the Navy commander of the Chinese armed forces, then you will see the only way to protect my coastline is to extend our defense and power projection capability far away from our territory. Why I need to do that? Because the economic center, financial center, education center, production center of today's China is all on the coastline. So the Navy's mission is to make sure that nobody touched this so I can continue to grow. To go out, you have a big stone right there. You can go other places, but there is a stopper, a stone blocking your way, and that's Taiwan.
Now, Taiwan depends on the outcome of elections that could change its executive power and stock market risks that can endanger its economy. Beijing, nevertheless, has understood that whatever the mood on the island, especially when it is favorable to political reconciliation, the strategy must never change. Imperturbable, the communist regime continues. On one hand, to offer Taiwan favorable business privileges on the mainland. On the other hand, it regularly reiterates its military threats. If the Taiwanese are too insistent about their desire for independence, they're going to have to fight for it. Whatever Taiwan's political tendencies, Beijing's position doesn't change one iota. A freeway in the middle of the island of Taiwan. In a few minutes, it has been transformed into a landing strip. The population watches this military exercise. They're used to it. French Mirage 2000 and American F-16 jets land and take off with an enormous roar. Faced with the uncertainty of American support, Taiwan organizes its own defense. Everyone knows that the airports will be the first target. Strategists on both sides of the strait affirm that the war will first begin with an air battle.
I think that experts the world over know that it's very difficult to succeed with an invasion. We still remember Normandy. In a strait like ours, it's what's in the air that will make the difference. And we've always tried to keep a strategic advantage over China, our air superiority. But with the Chinese missiles, this equilibrium has been put into question. They can destroy our airports, and if they are destroyed, we lose our only advantage over China, our air superiority.
Taiwan's military power is concentrated in its air force, but also in special ground forces. They are training to face the Chinese People's Liberation Army. In the event of a conflict, they expect elite Chinese troops to parachute onto the island to attack strategic targets.
Every Taiwanese people here knows that when the war comes, Taiwan is going to take the first bullet. We are going to take the first bullet, and probably we're going to take the bullets continue for about 2 weeks until a month, until that the United States coming. And there's no way that U.S. will come here to fight a difficult fight. If they really want to get involved, it's better for them that to wait when the Taiwanese people, we are wearing down the Chinese elite troops and give them the huge number of the sacrifice. And then the U.S. can come in and clean out the battlefield and win an easy fight. Everybody in Taiwan knows that.
In Washington, the scenario of the next confrontation is a constant preoccupation. They know that Chinese military power has increased significantly, but how the Pentagon will react in case of a new Taiwan crisis remains a mystery.
It's certainly not automatic, the support for Taiwan. It never has been. The United States has always maintained a policy of so-called strategic ambiguity, in which neither Beijing nor Taiwan can know clearly what the U.S. response might be under any given set of circumstances.
I think that 10 years later, from 1996, the missile crisis in the Taiwan Strait, to 2007, we would approach the Taiwan issue with a little bit more caution. We would approach the Taiwan issue with a lot more caution. What this means, I think, is that we would be probably resupplying Taiwan by air. We probably would put a active duty military contingent on Taiwan rather than risk putting our ships in harm's way.
Coming away from this crisis, the U.S. has concluded that I think there's been problems in what they've concluded. The U.S. has concluded that the Chinese were somewhat intimidated by the U.S. deployments, and that, in fact, they now know the U.S. is very determined to use force, if necessary, to ensure peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. In fact, however, I don't think the Chinese were all that intimidated by the deployment of the carriers. What they were is it strengthened their resolve to acquire capabilities so that they won't be intimidated in the future.
Since the 1996 confrontation between China and the United States around the Taiwan issue, I think China's military modernization speed up. And people saw some achievements, right? Now China owns J-10. That's the typical third generation fighter. And that made China is the third country that can independently produce the third generation firefighter. I think that's a strong signal to the U.S. side, what achievement on military modernization on PLA side.
If China's own terminal objective is trying to so-called unify Taiwan by using force to take over, I think their military capability is good enough. But I don't see that, because they are increasing their military budget over the last decade, almost every year, 2 digits.